Hello, and welcome back to Literally Literary. If this is your first time joining us, be sure to check out our previous episodes. This episode, we are beginning our discussion on Ándale, Prieta by Yasmin Ramírez. In this episode, we will be discussing an overview of the memoir and part 1.
We're a bit rusty. It's been a while. They're probably going to have a very long brew starting with that one.
Rewind it back. I don't even want to edit this out. This is just authentic right now. Finding our feet once more.
I know. Yeah, it's been a while, but it is the summer, and this is volunteer work, kind of. So,
how dare she?
Despite all our joking around for sponsors, that is yet to become a thing. So
yes. So yeah, I mean, we wanted to have a little bit of not really a hiatus, but just a little break. You know, we were pushing ourselves pretty hard this last year, especially Vanessa graduating.
Yes.
Yay!
Congrats!
Aw, you guys.
Yes.
I know we told you a million times, and then I may have cried at your party. But that's neither here nor there. Yeah, but we're back. We're excited to be back. We're going to read one of our very own, or we've already read, some of us. Ándale, Prieta. So we're excited to jump back in with a local author, Yasmin Ramírez. Yeah.
Who we all know quite well.
Yeah, and in different capacities, I guess. Do you want to go first, Vanessa?
Sure. I first met Yasmin when I took her creative writing class at EPCC. She really helped me a lot with my own writing, so it's really exciting to see hers in like this form.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Had you read, or had she? I know some teachers like to teach their own work. So.
No, she didn't. She didn't do that.
Okay, that's good.
I didn't hear some of her stuff until like years later.
Interesting.
Yeah, I was at one of the. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking. The literary fiesta. At the library.
Mm-hmm.
She read some of her work.
Yeah, that was a while back.
Yeah.
I think that might have been when I first heard her read one of these stories, actually. One of these chapters. Or a version of it, right?
Yeah.
So she's been working on this. Well, she was working on it in grad school at UTEP, and where she got her MFA. And so, yeah, it's nice. And that was a while back, too. So it's nice to kind of see that, you know, it's finally published and she's getting to share it with the world. What about you, Richie?
What about me? No, I was looking for proof here.
Proof?
So, I mean, obviously, other than right now EPCC, there's border census. That I've been involved with border census now for quite a while, and Yasmin was the director at some point, so we have a lot of that in common. But we also you were speaking about grad school, so I did take some classes with her at UTEP. We partied in London together like in 2011 as part of like a class that got to go travel. But I do remember in particular, I did take a class on memoir at UTEP in which we were in the same class. And so I'm pretty sure part of this was getting started there. In fact, sections about the tap, which, you know, I think is early on in this first part. She talks about it, you know, kind of being there as a kid. And I do remember that was with Professor Shelley Armitage. It was a fun class. So maybe between now and when we record second 2, I'll go back and just kind of review some of those readings. Because it was a pretty good class on memoir. So our final assignment, you know, instead of an essay, we had to write a memoir. And good times, you know. I'll have to unearth mine as well. But good stuff, yeah. And so I definitely remember that. It's great to see that she's been able to keep writing. I know she's been working on this one for a while. It's great to see how it's been put together. Can we talk about it?
Yeah. So let's talk about it.
So what's stopping you?
I know.
Let's continue.
I mean, okay. So the full title is Ándale, Prieta, Love Letter to My Family. Originally released by Cinco Puntos Press. And then it's
Which
kind
was
of a
sold.
yeah, it's kind of a weird. It happened during a weird transitional period, and so now it's Lee and Low Books out of New York. So that's cool and exciting. It's I think she's riding that wave right now because Cinco Puntos is a nice small press here, local and everything. But I mean, with everything you want to grow and get more visibility and stuff. So I feel like she's already doing that. Now that Lee and Low is the new press, I guess.
And shout out to the Birds too, for
Yes.
doing that for so long, having the press, and obviously they've published some iconic works, of authors that we've read here, including Ben Sines. So
Yeah.
And also in that time, she had the book release. I don't know if you guys want to take some time and reflect on that first before we. What did you guys think about that? Because all of us attended.
Yeah.
Yes. So it was released in April, the book, and the book release was at the end of that month, I want to say.
I think so.
At 501
Down in Texas.
Bistro.
Yeah.
That's what it's called, right?
At the San Carlos building.
San Carlos
Which
building,
is
yes.
houses the 501 Bistro.
Yeah, it was such a lovely release. It was nice to see, Yasmin so excited and so emotional about reading this, publishing the book and then reading passages and stuff. And I can't remember who read with her. You'll probably remember, Richie.
So JJ,
Yeah.
Abigail Clark.
Abigail,
Yeah.
I can remember her name.
And of course she had Rich Yanez host,
Yeah.
and then they had a nice Q&A segment, of which I actually have audio of. So I think one of the things I'm going to do is I'm probably going to publish that audio as a separate podcast through my BWAMS podcast. I kind of put that on the back burner for a little bit. But the BWAMS podcast is essentially kind of like artist interviews. Poets, writers, people who I meet at the open mic, or just people that I meet through, I guess, that connection. But I have a couple episodes I need to release, but I think I'm going to release like some of those segments. So if anyone wants to check that out, you can just look up BWAM's podcast. Side promotion. Yeah. I couldn't help it. I'm sorry. But it was great. It was a very nice event. One of the things I want to say is I think Yasmin did such a wonderful job getting people hyped up about the book. She had a couple different promo videos, which were nice, and a custom menu.
Menu,
Yes.
yeah, some cool
And,
drinks
there
and
was a
tacos.
bingo, there was
Yes,
like lottery.
don't forget about the bingo.
Yeah, the bingo.
Yeah,
So-
it was very cool. I mean, and if you know Yasmin, you know that's just who she is. She's one of those people who's not just going to have a half-ass book release party. It's going to be, a party.
Which
and
it
it
was.
was. Yeah. It was really fun. We shut it down. Of course, a few of us did, but yeah, it was really nice. And at that point, we hadn't started reading the book, so it just got us even more excited to dive in. Should we talk about the cover? I love this cover.
Yeah.
It has, so there's a really interesting story, and probably Yasmin can, when we have her on the pod, she can talk about that story. The cover artist or whatever helped to create it and everything, so I'll let her tell it. But it's a nice little, it has a house that she grew up in, that's still there on California Street in Central, like 2 blocks away from where I live now.
Yeah.
And then it has a bunch of little steps, and each step has different pictures and images. So it's a really pretty cover. I liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the illustrator, Anne Giangelo, was there at the release and was able to talk about it. And I think she even mentioned how she was able to go and find the house using the description from the book. I'm like,
Yeah.
you probably just found the address. But no, it's cool. She took that picture and you know, as you're looking, she was able to incorporate little snapshots of photos and family pics and textures. So it's a very compelling, right, cover, but it also these steps, these winding steps, definitely make an appearance, right? Especially this first section here. So it's pretty cool to see it, just kind of have it represented there. That's a great praise too,
Yeah.
all throughout.
Yeah. Vanessa, anything you'd like to add?
What do I want to say?
What are your impressions of part 1 so far?
I had a hard time with it at first. It just didn't feel... I don't know. I just had a hard time getting into it. But then as I started, as I kept going, I started to understand a lot more. And it just gets very... Like, you can tell that these are, like, important moments that she's talking about. And I'm hoping that in part 2, it kind of talks about how these moments might have healed her in finding herself. Because part 1 is called Finding Ita, who is her grandma. And then part 2 is Finding Yasmin. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah. It's kind of nice. I think you bring up an interesting point with memoir, especially it's hard to connect right away, right? Because it's someone else's story. So unless you've gone through those same exact experiences, you're not going to immediately be like, oh yeah, you know, this is a book for me. So I think usually, I mean, I don't know, at least that's always been my experience with reading memoir. It's because I'm already like separating myself from it. I'm not in a different way than I do with, you know, other types of books, novels or anything like that. So I don't know if maybe that's why it was hard for you to get into it.
I think also maybe having known her in a different way, and it's kind of making her a more round person in my head, I guess, because I only knew her from school.
Well, she's also your boss
At the writing center, so it's
there's
it's really
different roles, and then now you're seeing like her background and her
Yeah.
upbringing and stuff.
And it was different to kind of see her in that way, I think.
Yeah, same. Yeah, because I know Yasmin as like, you know, this one person. She has this way about her as a professor, as a colleague and stuff. And yeah, like I had heard stories, and she talks a little bit about it, but she's not very open like that. Often, especially not like this, right? So this is very personal.
Yeah.
So it almost feels like wrong to be
Like
reading this.
into,
It and again, I feel like that's all good memoirs anyway.
True.
Supposed to make you feel a little uneasy. But it's interesting because the three of us do know her in different capacities. So I think that it's affecting us differently than other people who read her memoir, who don't know her, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So Finding Ita is part 1. And the dedication is to Ita. So this whole book, excuse me, even though it is a love letter to my family, I feel like it is mostly a love letter to Ita, her grandmother, who's the one who primarily raised Yasmin. young Yasmin.
I was looking for pictures. You know, a lot of times in memoir, sometimes there's like photos.
Yeah, I thought
included,
there were going to be pictures.
So I was
I
hoping
wonder
to look through and like kind of more from my imagination, you know, my mind's eye, like when reading it, to like kind of put them together, like.
Yeah.
I think instead of the photos, she has the recipes though, and I think that's a really interesting way to like kind of give you that same kind of insight that a picture would, but through taste, maybe.
Yeah, I kind of wish the recipes had been like throughout the book, though, not at the end. I like that they're at the end, but I think they would have served that purpose a little more.
Yeah.
What you're talking about, Richie, if there were like a few dispersed throughout. But I'm not an editor, so
Yeah,
that's
so
why.
I mean, I guess that's another thing. You know, the way it's edited. The first part has some pretty good flow, but we were kind of talking about. I mean, I think it's interesting the way the Spanish comes off, because one of the first things you notice right now is she's not italicizing Spanish, which is great because that comes up a lot, right? But I was thinking it even in the first couple chapters, it is kind of strange how she kind of translates for the reader in the dialogue, which feels a little.
Feels a little like the italics could have been there, instead. Like, you don't need to.
Well, the idea then is the audience, because I mean, one of the things we were saying is who it's written for, and I wonder if there's editorial input. Like, well, if there's people reading it that don't know Spanish, how do you bridge that gap? And sometimes you're like, well, you don't,
Right.
But then of course, so there's this point early on where I just thought it was a little hard to kind of get going. Is where her grandmother Ita's talking to her in Spanish, and she's kind of answering, in which you find out what she said.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the birds they know Spanish?
I don't know. I've never heard.
I feel like I wonder if also the press or like who makes those decisions and.
I kind of feel like the birds wouldn't. They work with a lot of writers from here.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I've talked about a lot here. Like, even right now for my Spanish, it's around there, and even she mentions like there's moments where like the more formal Spanish she's kind of not quite aware of too as a kid and some of her experiences. So there's still this very much border Spanish.
Yeah.
Kind of like Spanish Spanglish kind of thing. Like.
Yeah, I do like that, and that touches on one of the major topics or things about the book is language and how Spanish played a huge role in her upbringing, but then of course like this new kind of, like you said, Spanglish, because she wouldn't speak it back to her grandmother. She understood it, but she would respond in English, which I feel like a lot of us kids would do. Growing up here, en el otro lado.
It's definitely a generational thing too, right? Where maybe younger generations feel more pressured to speak in English, and kind of like maybe for their classmates and.
Yeah.
And I think that's the case in a lot of households, where maybe they're at home speaking Spanish and then going to school and all the kids are speaking English maybe.
Yeah. Although now I feel like it's different. Like a lot of, I guess especially teaching at a college level and a bunch of our students that cross the border to go to class, they like will speak in Spanish that they feel totally comfortable doing that. But yeah, I feel like the ones who grew up here kind of shunned if we do speak Spanish, like, or even bullied.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Even with the generational thing, I do remember also when talking about Ita's boyfriends or husbands, there was, I can't remember his name. The one who, I guess she gets kind of scolded for speaking English. Not really scolded, but like she's like, don't speak English around because he can't understand you.
I think also her other grandmother, Mama Lupe.
Well,
I think I saw that where like she didn't really like her anyway, and like I guess she wasn't understanding. They weren't understanding each other, and so at one point she said, "Yeah, Mama Lupe just stopped talking to me altogether," and I was totally fine with it.
because she wouldn't address her formally as usted.
Oh, with
right?
usted and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole other.
And so already with that pressure, I guess she struggled so much that they just both gave up.
Yeah.
I've
She was like,
had
"I'm
experiences like that with older family members.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Yeah. And going off of like the language, there's a lot of talk of nicknames or apodos, right? So that's where we get the title, Ándale, Prieta. They talk about, about translation, like having a term like la chavala. That's on page 20.
Oh, yeah.
It's another nickname Ita had for me. In English, the girl sounds so unaffectionate. It's not the same. Maybe she called me that because I was the youngest one in the family. But yeah, it's true. Like there's so many of these, and if you're not part of the culture, like, and you try to explain that Prieta is a term of endearment or is cariñoso or affectionate, or gordo or flaca or whatever your nickname is growing up. People are just, they just don't understand that, right? It's like, oh, well, no wonder you have a complex, or how could they do that to you, or
Bringing back funeral for Flaca.
I know, right? Yeah. Güero, or, all these nicknames that are only given to you as soon as someone notices something about you.
Yeah.
When you're a baby, that you're whiter, then you're güero for the rest of your life. It's all just based on, physical traits. But anyway.
That's a great point. And all those names actually do make their way into the book. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I do like how you touch on that. There are a couple instances, including that one where she talks about like the ineffectiveness of English to represent something. Right. I think there's another instance when describing Ita too, where she's like, this phrase will not do it in English. So I have to use it. Yeah.
Yes.
So
It was about having a hard life. Let me find it.
I think it's towards the end of part 1.
Yeah.
And it's such a good point, because a lot of times so many things do get lost in translation. Literally. Or it just doesn't hold the same weight that it does in its mother tongue.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's worth kind of bringing up, right?
Yeah. Which is why I feel like the Spanish should have just been left alone. Just say it in Spanish, and you don't need to explain any of it.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
That's just me.
Yeah, I think that's why there was that little bit of a hurdle, I guess, navigating that early on. But I mean, other than that, like, we get to see her childhood a lot through this first part, and I do like the moments where she also just gets to talk about the difficulty of putting these memories together. Right? As narrator here, it's, mentioned that these come from phone calls, from memories, and probing not just her memories, but those of families around her.
Yeah.
And it's just, I do like the way she does these metaphors for talking about it, like fading pictures out in the sun. And I think it's always worth addressing in memoir and in the genre. Yeah.
Yeah. Anytime we do talk about memory, it's like we know that there's going to be some things we don't get quite right, and that's fine. That's that's perfectly acceptable. But I like that. I like that she does address that too.
And it seems like in doing this, and even in writing this, she's definitely come to realizations that maybe she just hadn't had yet. Revelations, and I think even reflecting on, when she first started school and she would always cry, and I think she has a realization that it was because of her mom's job, right? And feeling concerned for her. Mm-hmm. That seems like maybe a revelation much after the fact of reflecting on.
Yeah.
So, and I think there's a couple other instances as well in which I think in writing this, you just kind of start to understand more, especially I think, for example, the tough relationship between her mother and Anita, right? Mm-hmm. And I think she even has a point to say she recognizes like where they kind of clashed, and she realizes, if only I had understood sooner to mention it to them. Something along those lines, right?
Yeah. I think a lot of memoir is reflection, right? Like you're telling your story, but there's a purpose to it. You're not just talking about your childhood and all these experiences you had. It's all these experiences you had and how they made you who you are today, right? So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah. And of course, I think she gets to revel in that fact too, and again, celebrating it through music and through food, right? Some of those memories seem very fond, and how she got to spend some moments with her family in those instances.
Do you want to talk about the music in the book, Vanessa?
Yeah, so there's also a playlist for this book.
Very much like a Funeral for Flaca.
Yeah, I think it's becoming more of a trend, honestly. Like a lot of the books we've discussed have them now. Yeah, there's not a whole lot of songs, but I feel like music in general plays a really big part throughout. Or just, I guess, sound. I feel like sound is really important in this.
Yeah. Good point.
So I really like that. That was interesting to read. Because I just don't feel like a lot of books that we've talked about talk a lot about this, like just sounds.
Yeah, she definitely uses some onomatopoeia that I'm not used to seeing, I guess. Like, whoa.
Yeah. So that was fun to read. In some of the cases with the songs, she does point out specific ones that you probably want to listen to. So I think it's interesting also how she differentiated between ones specifically like just being mentioned and other ones that, no, you actually really have to listen to this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were talking about this pre-show. So there are some places, like Vanessa mentioned, where the narrator breaks the fourth wall and in parentheticals tells us to stop what we're doing and find the song and listen to it.
Elbow nudge.
Yeah. Which is interesting because it does kind of disrupt, the flow of what we're reading in that moment. And so I, to be perfectly honest, did not do that. I did not stop and listen to the songs because I knew them. I was familiar with them already. So I think that might be why. But I also didn't stop to think what that song or listening to that song in that moment would contribute to that particular scene that I was reading. So I think on the second read, I'll probably do that and see how it affects it, my reading of it, or that memory that she's trying to link to that song. But it is an interesting exercise for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe pushing the pushiness aside of like, all right, put this on now. Dear reader, light a candle. set the mood for this scene. I do think it's kind of
not that kind of book.
Prompting. I know. I'm just being ridiculous as usual. Oh man, but what I mean is like, if it weren't for copyright, if this were an audio book, you know for sure that'd be kind of in the background, or if there were a movie adaptation. All right, here's your soundtrack right now. It's kind of the effect I think she's going for, right? Having it there, and I guess as a reader, it's up to us to include that now as the soundtrack of where we're going on.
Yeah.
I want you to imagine this song where this is going on.
Just going back to, I found a passage on page 22 and then one on page 25. What we were talking about moments ago, just how a lot of this is her reflecting in the moment, but also about the moment as her future self, if that makes sense. Towards the bottom of page 22. And this is a really nice scene where Ita is singing. And she says, her voice seemed to express everything she could never say in words. In these moments, my chest tightened and I imagined what I'd be like later. Would I be like Ita, a huge wall of tough exterior protecting her from whatever made her eyes shine when she sang? So I really like that passage. And then another one where she just says, in many ways, this is on page 25, in many ways, I am my Ita's sombra. How could I not be like her? And I read those, and I know that they're present moments, but they also feel like we're like things that she's thinking about after the fact, right? Like now that she's older, she of course sees that connection and how so alike she is, how similar she is to Ita now. At least that's how I read it. I don't know.
There's also parts where she explicitly says it, like, now I feel this way. Let me see if I can find one. On 89 is the first one I found. There's other ones, but so the last paragraph on that page, I nodded at the other end of the phone, remembering the story. The neighbor telling us about a homeless man peeking through the windows of her house a year after she had died. Ita had always been an anchor for Gil. Now I imagined he floated around even more aimlessly than usual, a can of natural light in his hand. Just like saying, this is how I felt then, and now I feel this way. Or now I think about it this way.
Mm-hmm. That's a really cool chapter. She talks about all of Ita's past husbands and men. And then there's another chapter, the one right before it, with all her scars.
It's an interesting juxtaposition, right?
Yeah.
The way they're formatted, they're very parallelism.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I really liked both of those chapters.
And I also love how in the previous chapter, it all kind of leads up to it, talking about scars that are not visible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What is it, on page 71 at the very end of that chapter? When I look at my hand now, I can't find the scar. It must have faded. Or all the other lines of my palm swallowed it up. Scars are funny things because even after they've disappeared, they still leave an invisible mark. So I think that just sets up perfectly, talking about Ita's physical scars, and then maybe the other scars through kind of these men here. Mm-hmm. So that's what we were talking about before the show, is just it really picks up this really nice flow, as the chapter builds up and continues.
Yeah, I agree.
I also feel like the body itself is just like a really important part of this whole book. I didn't really understand it in the first chapters, but then when I got to like these chapters about scars and like just the way that the body changes also when she's looking at her grandma, and then it's kind of like I kind of started to see the importance of just people's bodies, I guess, in a different way, I guess, is what I mean.
Yeah, there's a lot of those. not just like the scars again, as part of like the breast cancer or anything like that, but also I really enjoyed her like nighttime rituals and like the attention to like the face and the creams that she would use. And so it was really kind of like a lovely memory or scene, that she's setting up. And it happens a few times. It isn't just one chapter. There's a few chapters or so. There's that,
right.
She really wants us to have that image.
True. Yeah, I mean, so in light of your reflection, I think that even the first chapter, which just kind of just seems like you're thrown into this world, kind of makes more sense though, because it's talking about this very intimate thing, mastectomy, and women, and it's her kind of explaining how she's kind of already familiar and comfortable here.
I think setting too, the kitchen, the bathroom,
and all the colors.
Yeah, all the different colors. Those really stand out. Now that I finished the book, I just keep remembering like the kitchen and the yellow kitchen and the pink bathroom.
Green living room.
Green living room.
There you go.
How fun.
I know. And, also outside of the home, downtown Juarez, she talks a lot about the Tap Bar downtown El Paso. I really love that chapter where she's a child at the Tap, and there's a few of those moments, but where she's falling asleep, and they already have the little pillow and blanket there for her. And it's like, yeah, you're not Mexican until you fall asleep, and there's like music blasting in the background.
So many of us have memories of like quinceañeras, family events,
weddings.
Just a little kid falling
There's
asleep.
always a little kid sleeping somewhere, sleeping through it all.
Spot on. What about the humor? So I think she definitely has some playful moments and uses like some creative humor. I don't know if you guys had any moments here in this first part that stood out to you.
Yes, and I thought I had. I didn't write it in my notes, but I have it in the book underlined. There's little jabs here and there, like when they go to Juarez and they see all the men with sarapes and sombreros. She's like, no, those are for the stupid tourists,
The silly gringos.
The gringos, yes. My stomach is growling.
It sounds like a train to me.
I'm thinking of Juarez and tacos.
Oh, come on.
Don't. Why would you do that?
I told
dirty.
you I was angry when I got here.
Hungry. That's my secret. I'm always hungry.
I know. I'm so sorry, guys. It's because I knew it was going to happen. I don't know. It was somewhere in here, but I found it. I don't want to say it though because it's a bad word. On page 108.
Okay.
Tío Prieto, that's what we call Alfredo because he's dark like a cocoa bean. Lives in Houston with his high school sweetheart. He's the only one of the siblings who hasn't gotten divorced and has been married since he was 20. He has 2 kids, James and Mercedes. They don't really speak any Spanish. The rest of us at least understand, but they think they're gringos, even though they are as dark as Tío Prieto. Ita says, ay sí, muy gringos con el culo prieto. Skin gets browner in certain places, brown arm, browner ass crack. So anyway, like it talks about it a little more. Tortillas, tacos, like she uses those different ways, but I found that funny. My mom wouldn't say that way, but she's like, "Ay, sí, con el nopal en la frente," which is basically the same thing.
Yeah.
They look Mexican, so they should be able to speak Spanish.
Yeah.
Which now we know is problematic, but you know.
Oh yeah, we still get that a lot.
Yeah.
All the time.
How do you not? What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That whole chapter is pretty heavy. Like for one, I think it gives her like a lot of much more room to flex her creative muscles because you're dealing with this like fictionalized, imagined family, right? And then it's kind of that gut punch too, right? Of realizing just yeah, I think she talks about it. Page. Oh yeah, 110, right? So it kind of comes, but she does quite a build-up of like talking about all her imagined tios and tias and their families, and she gives us pretty interesting characterizations of them. So it is it's a fun chapter, but ultimately a kind of a downer too.
Yeah. Yeah, we learn about how many miscarriages she had, and even an abortion at one point. Yeah.
And of course, I was reading this section this morning on the eve of like, Supreme Court, it's just, oh my God.
You want to get into that right
now?
now?
No, I'm just realizing it's a can of worms, but I think all of us can feel that frustration and fear, but you get a sense though too, like this is a very intimate past history with Ita here.
Yeah, and I like that passage where she says she did what she had to do, went to Juárez para que la curaran, which is so fitting, like especially what happened today, and banning abortions doesn't mean getting rid of abortions, just getting rid of safe abortions or having to go elsewhere. A lot more. I mean, we're not going to talk about abortion. We're talking about Ándale, Prieta.
But I guess it's just because it's happening still.
It's relevant, for sure.
That's why I was on my mind finishing. I was like, oh my God, you can't. This is crazy.
Anything else you want to say about the book? Any
first part.
other themes or like other connections to past books? I know, Vanessa, you like to do that.
The past books. I was thinking of one on the way here. Which one was it? It was another one that we did for the podcast, I think.
Funeral for Flaca?
I mean, yeah, but that one I feel like might be a little bit more obvious.
Yeah.
What book was it? Oh my gosh.
You're going to have to look at your reel.
I know. I'm like, hold on.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few. Like, I think of using the photograph as a motif makes me think of in Ben Sign's Everything Begins and Ends at the Kentucky Club. There's that story, too, that's based off of, like, a photo. What else? There's, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of thematic things. Yeah. I mean, one of the more obvious ones is Funeral for Flaca. Man, waiting for the part 2, right? When Yasmin turns angsty.
Oh, yeah. It's good. It gets good. I mean, it is good. The first part I really enjoyed.
I can't remember which one it was.
Well, maybe you'll remember it in part 2
I know.
of the pod.
Oh, it wasn't one we did for the podcast.
Oh, there you go.
That's why it wasn't coming to my head. For my literature and film class, my women in literature class that I took. It was another book that had recipes in it. I want to say it was...
Was it Denise Chavez? A Taco Testimony?
No,
it was... That's a good one,
I
want
to say...
Good one.
Like Water for
Chocolate?
I think so.
I've never read it.
I think so.
But yeah, I do remember you talking about it.
Yeah. That one, I believe, had recipes in it, too.
When Yasmin comes on, we should make these tacos, and then we'll have a little taco/podcast.
Yeah, so I think as a looking forward, we're definitely going to talk about the second half of the book next episode, but we do intend to bring Yasmin on as a guest, and hopefully that can be another filmed episode. And we can hopefully bring some food. That's always a lot of fun.
Yay.
Yes. That's what Vanessa's most excited about. I know. I think we take for granted that like we have this physical book in our hands and we know the author, but you know, a lot of people can't say that. So we should definitely. I appreciate that.
Yes.
You know.
It's always a great thing, you know, just to experience and to see.
So congratulations, Yasmin, on the book and all of your success right now. We hope more people read it.
Yes.
Oh, and we also have, in the upcoming weeks, we're going to be promoting some giveaways, speaking of books and having more people read.
Free books.
Free books. So be on the lookout for that.
Yes. And where can people find us and all that good stuff?
You can find us on Instagram at literallyliterary.ep and on Twitter at literallylitep.
Nice.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Literally Literary, recorded at Power at the Pass and brought to you by Border Census. This episode, we began our discussion on Ándale, Prieta by Yasmin Ramírez. If you haven't read it, we hope we inspire you to pick up a copy. Join us on our next episode and follow us on Instagram and on Twitter.